The glass was already halfway to his lips when Elena Cross moved. She did not think. She did not plan. Her hand shot across the narrow space between them and closed around the crystal tumbler, a heartbeat before it reached Dmitry Volkov's mouth. The amber liquid sloshed against the rim, and for one frozen second, nobody in the crowded lounge understood what had just happened. "What are you doing?" Dmitry's voice was low and dangerous, the kind of voice that made grown men step back. Elena did not answer him with words. She lifted the glass to her own lips and drank. The bitterness hit her first, sharp and metallic, curling at the back of her throat like a warning she had ignored too late. Then came the burning, spreading fast through her chest, down into her stomach, out along her arms until her fingers tingled and went numb. The room tilted. The music, which had been pounding through the club only seconds earlier, dissolved into a dull roar inside her skull. She switched glasses. Someone hissed nearby, and suddenly every guard in the room was moving. Dmitry caught her before she hit the floor. His hands, usually so controlled, gripped her shoulders with a force that betrayed the panic he refused to show on his face. "Look at me," he ordered, his voice cutting through the fog, swallowing her mind. "Stay awake. That is an order." Elena wanted to laugh. Even now, dying on the floor of a nightclub, this man gave orders as if the world owed him obedience. But her vision was narrowing into a tunnel, and the edges of the room had gone black, and the last thing she saw before darkness claimed her completely was the face of a man she had never spoken to before tonight, a man whose name she barely knew, staring down at her with something that looked almost like fear. "Get the car!" Dmitry barked at the nearest guard. "Now! She has minutes, maybe less." They moved through the club like a storm, guards clearing a path through stunned onlookers, while Dmitry carried Elena's limp body through the side exit himself, refusing to hand her to anyone else. The night air hit her skin, cold and sharp, though she felt nothing anymore, her body slipping further away from her with every passing second. In the back of the speeding car, Dmitry pressed 2 fingers against her throat, counting the weakening pulse beneath her skin, while shouting instructions into his phone. "I need Dr. Feld at the house in 10 minutes. Tell him it is poison. Tell him it is fast-acting. Tell him if he is not ready when I arrive, I will burn down everything he owns." The threat was not idle. Elena, drifting somewhere between consciousness and oblivion, registered the fury in his voice, even as her own body began shutting down around her. Her lips had gone cold. Her breathing had turned shallow and ragged. Somewhere far away, she heard Dmitry say her name, though she had never told him what it was. "Elena Cross," he said again, softer this time, as if repeating it might anchor her to the world. "Stay with me." He knew her name because one of his men had recognized her, a hostess who had worked the floor for 6 weeks. Quiet and unremarkable, until the moment she threw herself between a killer's poison and the man it was meant for. Dmitry stared down at her pale face, questions burning through his mind faster than he could ask them. Why had she done it? What did a stranger owe him that was worth her own life? The car screeched to a stop outside a private estate, hidden behind tall iron gates. Guards flung the doors open before the vehicle had fully stopped, and Dmitry carried Elena inside himself, moving faster than his men had ever seen him move, cutting through the grand entrance hall toward a private wing where a team of medical staff waited, already scrambling into position. "Get her stabilized," Dmitry commanded, laying her carefully on a gurney. "I do not care what it costs. I do not care what rules you break. Save her." Dr. Feld, a stern older man with steady hands, began working immediately, hooking up monitors, drawing blood, calling out instructions to his assistants in short, clipped sentences. Dmitry stood at the edge of the room, arms crossed tightly against his chest, watching every movement with an intensity that unsettled even the most experienced members of his staff. "Sir, you should let us work," Feld said without looking up from his patient. "Your presence is not helping." "I am not leaving," Dmitry said flatly. "Do your job." Outside the room, Dmitry's second-in-command, A sharp-eyed man named Oliver pulled him aside urgently. "We have a problem. The poison was meant for you. Whoever arranged this is still out there, and they will know their attempt failed within the hour." "Then find them," Dmitri snapped. "Find whoever slipped that vial into my drink before they realize their plan collapsed the moment she took my place." "And the girl?" Oliver asked carefully. "What do we do about her?" Dmitri's jaw tightened as he glanced through the small window into the room where Elena lay motionless, her chest rising and falling in shallow, uneven breaths. "We protect her, whatever it takes." Inside, the machines beeped steadily, each pulse a fragile thread, keeping Elena tethered to life. Dr. Feld worked with practiced urgency, administering a series of injections designed to counteract the poison's effects, though he offered no guarantees, no reassurances that his efforts would be enough. The poison had been engineered for speed and lethality, meant to kill a full-grown man within minutes. Elena's smaller frame meant the toxin had already done significant damage before treatment even began. Hours passed. Dmitri paced the hallway outside her room, refusing food, refusing rest, refusing every attempt his staff made to pull him away from his vigil. Around midnight, Feld finally emerged, his expression grim but not without hope. "She is stable, for now," the doctor reported, "but the next 72 hours will determine whether she survives. Her body is fighting hard, but the poison has affected her organs significantly. We will not know the full extent of the damage until she wakes, if she wakes." Dmitri absorbed this information silently, his expression unreadable to anyone watching, though the tension in his shoulders told a different story. "I want updates every hour," he said finally, "and I want to know the moment anything changes." He entered the room alone once the doctor departed, pulling a chair close to her bedside and sitting down heavily, exhaustion finally beginning to show on his features. He studied her face carefully in the dim light, searching for some explanation in her still expression. Some reason a stranger would sacrifice everything for a man she had every reason to fear. "Why?" he murmured, more to himself than to her unconscious form. "Why would you do this?" The machines answered with their steady, mechanical rhythm, offering no explanation, only the fragile promise that she was still, for now, alive. Across the city, in a location far removed from the comfort and security of Dmitri's estate, a different conversation unfolded in hushed, urgent tones. A man stood near a window overlooking the skyline, phone pressed to his ear, listening to a report that made his expression darken with fury. "He is still alive," the voice on the other end confirmed. "Someone intervened. A woman took the poison meant for him." "Impossible," the man snapped, his grip tightening around the phone. "Who would sacrifice themselves for Volkov?" "We do not know yet, but she is at his estate now, under his protection. If she survives, she may know things." The man near the window fell silent for a long moment, calculating his next move with the cold precision of someone accustomed to eliminating problems before they grew larger. "Then we ensure she does not survive," he said finally. "And we ensure Volkov understands this is only the beginning." The call ended, and the man turned back toward the city lights, already planning his next move against an enemy who had, against every expectation, escaped death only because a stranger had chosen to die in his place. Back at the estate, Elena's condition remained precarious throughout the early hours of the morning. Her fever spiked without warning around 2 in the morning, her body trembling violently as her temperature climbed dangerously high. Feld rushed back into the room, working quickly alongside his assistants to bring the fever under control, while Dmitri stood pressed against the far wall, watching helplessly as machines beeped in frantic rhythm around her. "What is happening?" he demanded, his composure finally cracking under the strain of watching her fight for her life. "Her body is reacting to the toxin's secondary effects," Feld explained quickly, adjusting the intravenous line feeding into her arm. "This is expected, though dangerous. We need to bring this fever down immediately or risk permanent damage." Dmitri watched in tense silence as the medical team worked to stabilize her, ice packs pressed against her burning skin, additional medication administered through the line running into her arm. Elena's body convulsed slightly, a soft, pained sound escaping her lips even in her unconscious state, and something inside Dmitri twisted painfully at the sound. Slowly, gradually, her fever began to recede, the frantic beeping of the machines settling into a steadier, calmer rhythm. Feld exhaled with visible relief, wiping sweat from his brow as he stepped back from the bed. "She is stabilizing again," he confirmed, "but we are not out of danger yet. The next few hours remain critical." Dmitri nodded silently, returning to his chair beside her bed once the medical team departed, his eyes never leaving her pale, fragile face. Outside, dawn was beginning to break over the city, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink, indifferent to the quiet battle for life unfolding within the estate's private walls. As the first rays of sunlight filtered through the curtains, Dmitri found himself studying Elena's features more closely than he had allowed himself to before. She was younger than he had initially assumed, her face still carrying traces of exhaustion from working long shifts within his club. Faint scars marked her hands, small reminders of a difficult life he knew nothing about. Who was this woman who had thrown herself between him and certain death without a moment's hesitation? He thought back to the club records Oliver had pulled overnight. Elena Cross, 26 years old, hired 6 weeks earlier after submitting an application that listed no prior employment history within the hospitality industry. She had no family listed as emergency contacts, no permanent address on file beyond a small apartment in a modest part of the city. Everything about her file suggested someone starting fresh, someone running from something or towards something, though the records offered no clear answers either way. "Who are you?" Dmitri whispered again, watching the steady rise and fall of her chest. "And what exactly did you know before you decided to save my life?" The question lingered unanswered as morning fully arrived, the estate slowly stirring to life around them, while Elena remained trapped in the fragile space between survival and loss, her fate still uncertain, her secrets still buried, and the danger surrounding them both only just beginning to reveal its true and terrible shape. By mid-morning, the estate had shifted into a state of quiet, controlled alarm. Every guard on the property had been briefed, every camera feed monitored without pause, every visitor screened 3 times before being allowed past the front gates. Dmitri had not slept, had not changed out of the suit he wore the night before, and had not left Elena's side for longer than 5 minutes at a stretch. Oliver found him there again shortly after 9, standing near the window with his arms crossed, watching the gardens below as though searching for movement among the hedges. "You need rest," Oliver said carefully. "You are no good to her exhausted." "I will rest when she wakes," Dmitri replied without turning around. Oliver studied his friend for a long moment, recognizing something in his posture that he had not seen in years, not since the early days after Dmitri's father died, and the weight of the entire organization fell suddenly onto shoulders far too young to carry it. "This is more than obligation," Oliver said quietly. "Is it not?" Dmitri did not answer directly. "Have you found anything on the poison's origin?" Oliver understood the deflection for what it was, and let the matter drop, at least for now. "The chemical signature matches a supplier we have seen before. Someone with resources. Someone patient enough to plan an approach inside a room full of your own guards. This was not a rushed attempt. Someone has been watching you for weeks." "Then they know about her by now," Dmitri said, his voice hardening. "They know their plan failed, and they know she is the reason." "Which means she remains a target," Oliver finished grimly. "As long as she is connected to you, whoever did this will see her as unfinished business." Dmitri finally turned from the window, his expression set with grim resolve. "Then we finish this before they get the chance to try again. Double the perimeter guard. No one enters this property without my direct authorization, and I want eyes on every road leading toward the estate." Oliver nodded and left quickly to relay the instructions, leaving Dmitri alone once more with his thoughts and the steady, mechanical rhythm of the monitors keeping watch over Elena's fragile condition. Just past noon, the quiet of the estate shattered without warning. A guard's voice crackled urgently over the radio system, reporting movement near the southern fence line, a section of the property bordered by dense trees that made surveillance difficult even with modern equipment. Dmitri's head snapped up instantly, every instinct sharpening into focus. "Report," he demanded, snatching the radio from a nearby table. "Unclear, sir. Possibly nothing. Motion sensors triggered twice in the last 10 minutes. "Send a team to check it," Dmitri ordered, though unease had already settled heavily in his chest. Whoever had poisoned him last night would not wait long to try again, and a compromised perimeter so soon after the attack felt far too coincidental to ignore. Minutes stretched painfully as Dmitri waited for confirmation, standing rigid near Elena's bedside, one hand resting protectively near the edge of her blanket, as though his presence alone could shield her from whatever threat approached. The radio crackled again, and this time the guard's voice carried a note of tension that made Dmitri's blood run cold. "Sir, we have a body near the fence. One of our own. He is down, but alive. Whoever did this moved fast and left no trace." "They are already inside," Dmitri said sharply, his mind racing through the estate's layout, calculating vulnerabilities, weighing risks. "Lock down the house immediately. No one moves in or out until we know exactly what we are dealing with." Guards scrambled into position throughout the estate, sealing exits, sweeping rooms, moving with practiced urgency born from years of preparing for exactly this kind of scenario. Dmitri remained beside Elena, refusing to leave her unprotected even for a moment, his hand now resting on the weapon concealed beneath his jacket, eyes scanning the room's single door with unwavering focus. 10 agonizing minutes passed before Oliver's voice finally crackled through the radio, breathless but steady. "We found him. A single intruder, likely scouting the property rather than attempting a direct attack. He is in custody now." Relief flooded through Dmitri, though it was tempered immediately by anger. "Bring him to me." The intruder, a wiry man with cold, calculating eyes, was dragged before Dmitri within the hour, restrained firmly by 2 guards who showed no gentleness in their handling. Dmitri studied him carefully, recognizing nothing familiar in his face, though the tattoo visible along his forearm told its own story, marking him as connected to an organization Dmitri had crossed paths with before. "Who sent you?" Dmitri asked, his voice deceptively calm. The man said nothing, his jaw set with stubborn defiance despite the clear danger of his situation. "You will understand," Dmitri continued, stepping closer, "that I am not currently in a patient mood. My guard lies injured because of you. A woman fights for her life in the room behind me because of whoever ordered this. I suggest you reconsider your silence." Still the man refused to speak, and Dmitri finally gestured for his guards to remove him from the room, already formulating a different approach to extracting the information he needed. Whoever had sent this scout would not stop simply because their first attempt had failed and their second had been intercepted. This was only the beginning of a much larger conflict, one that now, inescapably, included Elena at its center. As afternoon shadows lengthened across the estate, Dmitri returned once more to Elena's bedside, the earlier chaos settling into watchful tension throughout the property. He studied her still face carefully, noting the faint furrow in her brow even in unconsciousness, as though even now, deep within whatever darkness held her, some part of her sensed the danger surrounding them both. "Whoever you are," he said quietly, taking her hand gently in his, careful of the intravenous line taped along her wrist, "you have made powerful enemies simply by saving my life. I will not let them finish what they started. Not with you, not while I still draw breath." Elena's fingers twitched faintly against his palm, the smallest sign of life beyond the mechanical rhythm of the monitors, and for the first time since the poisoning, Dmitri allowed himself a fragile flicker of hope. even as the danger surrounding the estate continued closing in from every direction, patient and relentless, waiting for the next opportunity to strike. A knife flashed in the darkness of the medical wing, and Grace, the young nurse assigned to the night shift, barely had time to scream before a gloved hand clamped over her mouth. She had stepped out for less than 60 seconds to fetch fresh bandages. 60 seconds had been enough. The intruder had slipped through a service corridor Dimitri's men had somehow overlooked, moving silently past a rotating guard shift toward the one room in the entire estate that mattered most. Elena lay unconscious in her bed, utterly defenseless, the machines around her beeping in steady, oblivious rhythm as the figure crept closer, syringe glinting in his other hand. Grace fought against the hand covering her mouth, driving her elbow backward into her attacker's ribs with every ounce of strength she possessed. The man grunted, his grip loosening for just a fraction of a second, and Grace used that fraction to scream, the sound tearing through the quiet hallway like a siren. Guards flooded the corridor within seconds. The intruder abandoned his approach toward Elena's room, spinning to face the new threat instead, and what followed was fast and brutal, guards tackling him to the ground before he could reach for any weapon beyond the syringe still clutched in his fist. Dimitri arrived moments later, having sprinted the entire length of the east wing the instant he heard the alarm, his expression carved from stone as he took in the scene. "Is she safe?" he demanded, pushing past his men toward Elena's door. "She's untouched," one guard confirmed quickly. Grace stopped him before he reached her. Dimitri burst into the room anyway, needing to see for himself, and found Elena exactly as she had been left, pale and still, the monitors beside her tracking a heartbeat that remained, miraculously, undisturbed. Relief crashed through him so intensely his hands trembled as he gripped the edge of her bed frame, steadying himself against a fear he had not expected to feel this powerfully. Behind him, the captured intruder was dragged away, snarling threats that meant nothing against the fury radiating from every guard who had failed, however briefly, to protect the estate's most vulnerable resident. Dimitri turned to face Grace, who stood trembling in the doorway, a fresh bruise already forming along her jaw. "You saved her life," he said quietly. "I did my job," Grace replied, though her voice shook with the aftermath of adrenaline. "Sir, they knew exactly where to find her. Someone gave them the layout of this wing." The implication hit Dimitri like a physical blow. A traitor. Someone within his own household had provided information to the very people trying to finish what the poison had started. His jaw tightened as his mind raced through every member of his staff, every guard, every servant who had access to sensitive information about the estate's layout. "Lock down every exit," he ordered sharply. "No one leaves this property until we identify who provided that information. And move her." Within the hour, Elena was transferred to a hidden room deep within the estate's lower level, a space few even knew existed, accessible only through a concealed passage behind Dimitri's private study. Dr. Feld re-established her monitoring equipment quickly, working alongside two guards Dimitri trusted with his own life, men who had served his family for over a decade without a single question of their loyalty. "This should never have happened," Feld said grimly, adjusting the intravenous line once again. "Her body cannot withstand additional stress. If that intruder had reached her, in her current state, even without physical harm, the shock alone could have been fatal." Dimitri absorbed this warning silently, guilt and fury tangled together in his chest. He had promised himself he would protect her, and within 24 hours of that promise, an assassin had come within seconds of reaching her unguarded bedside. Elena's fever returned that night, worse than before, her body racked with violent tremors that left the medical team scrambling for hours to stabilize her condition. Dimitri sat beside her through it all, refusing every suggestion that he rest, watching helplessly as her small frame shuddered beneath layers of blankets, while machines screamed warnings that made his chest tighten with dread. "She's fighting something deeper than the poison now," Feld admitted quietly during a brief lull. "The stress of tonight's events has compounded the toxin's effects. I cannot promise she survives another shock like this." "There will not be another," Dmitri said, his voice low and absolute. "I will ensure it myself." True to his word, he personally interrogated every member of the household staff over the following hours, cross-referencing schedules, access logs, and phone records with methodical precision. By early morning, the pattern emerged clearly. A junior guard named Marcus, hired only 3 months earlier, had made a call to an unregistered number less than an hour before the intruder breached the medical wing. Marcus did not deny it when confronted, his composure crumbling the instant Dimitri's men surrounded him in the estate's lower courtyard. "They threatened my sister," he stammered, sweat beading along his forehead despite the cold morning air. "They said if I didn't help them, they would hurt her. I didn't know they meant to kill anyone. I swear it." Dmitri studied him with cold, assessing eyes. "Who threatened you? Give me a name." Marcus hesitated only a moment before the fear in Dimitri's expression convinced him silence was far more dangerous than betrayal. "A man named Victor Hale. He runs operations on the eastern side of the city. He said Volkov owed him a reckoning, something about old business between your families." The name meant nothing to Elena, unconscious 3 floors below, but it struck Dmitri with sudden, sharp recognition, memories stirring of a smaller organization his father had once done business with decades earlier, before disputes over territory and resources had fractured whatever alliance once existed between them. "Hale," Dmitri repeated, the name settling into his mind like a stone dropped into still water. "This goes back further than I realized." He ordered Marcus placed under guard, unwilling to punish a man acting under threat to his family, though equally unwilling to trust him again without careful monitoring. His focus shifted immediately toward identifying every connection Victor Hale might have within the city, every resource, every hidden advantage that had allowed him to orchestrate an attack this precise against a target as heavily guarded as Dmitri himself. By the second night, Elena's condition finally began to stabilize, her fever breaking sometime past midnight, her tremors subsiding into restless but peaceful sleep. Dmitri remained at her side throughout, exhaustion finally catching up with him as dawn approached, his head drooping forward in the chair beside her bed, despite his determination to stay alert. He dreamed, briefly, of his father, a man who had taught him that power meant nothing without the will to protect those who depended on it. In the dream, his father's voice echoed the same question Dmitri had been asking himself since the poisoning. Why did this woman matter so much, so quickly, to a man who had spent years building walls against exactly this kind of vulnerability? He woke abruptly when Feld entered the room quietly, checking Elena's vitals with careful, practiced movements. "Her fever has fully broken," the doctor reported softly, careful not to disturb her rest. "Her organs show signs of recovery. If this trend continues, she may wake within the next day." Relief washed through Dmitri so completely his shoulders sagged forward, tension he had carried for nearly 2 full days finally beginning to release. "Thank you," he said quietly, meaning it more sincerely than he had thanked anyone in years. As the 3rd day dawned, gentle sunlight filtering through the hidden room's single narrow window, Dmitri received word that his men had located one of Victor Hale's known safe houses on the city's eastern edge. The information came from an informant deep within Hale's organization, someone Oliver had cultivated over years of careful, patient work. "We could move on it immediately," Oliver suggested, standing in the doorway of Dmitri's study, while Dmitri reviewed the intelligence report carefully. "Strike before he expects retaliation this quickly." Dmitri considered the option seriously, weighing the advantage of surprise against the risk of leaving Elena's protection understaffed during such a critical moment in her recovery. "Not yet," he decided finally. "I will not divide my attention while she remains this vulnerable. Hale will keep. Elena's safety comes first." Oliver nodded, respecting the decision despite the obvious tactical cost of delay. "Understood. I'll maintain surveillance on the location until you're ready to move." As Oliver departed, Dmitri returned to the hidden room where Elena continued her slow recovery, finding Grace adjusting the pillows behind her while Elena's eyelids fluttered faintly, the first genuine sign of consciousness beginning to surface after 3 brutal days of fighting for her life. "She's close," Grace whispered excitedly. "I think she's finally waking up." Dmitri moved closer, watching intently as Elena's breathing shifted, growing steadier, more deliberate, her fingers twitching against the blanket covering her still fragile form. He leaned forward, close enough that his voice would be the first thing she heard when consciousness finally returned. "Elena," he said softly, "you're safe now. Whatever comes next, I will make certain of that. You have my word." Outside the hidden room, beyond the estate's fortified walls, Victor Hale sat in his own private office, staring at a phone that had gone unexpectedly silent, his carefully laid plan unraveling faster than he had anticipated. His informant inside Volkov's household had gone dark. His assassin had failed. And somewhere within that fortress of an estate, the woman who had ruined his carefully orchestrated attack was, against every calculation he had made, still alive and slowly regaining strength. He rose from his desk, moving toward the window overlooking his own modest compound, jaw clenched with barely restrained fury. 2 failed attempts, 2 opportunities wasted. Whatever came next would need to be far more decisive, far more ruthless, and this time he would ensure there was no possibility of failure standing between him and the reckoning he had waited years to claim against the Volkov name. Her eyes snapped open to the sound of gunfire. For a terrifying instant, Elena believed the noise came from inside her own room, and she bolted upright despite the weakness gripping every muscle in her body, her heart slamming against her ribs. Dmitri was already on his feet, weapon drawn, moving toward the door with the fluid speed of a man who had trained his entire life for exactly this kind of moment. "Stay down," he commanded without turning around. The gunfire, it turned out, came from beyond the estate's outer wall, a brief exchange near the northern gate that ended almost as quickly as it began. A radio crackled from the hallway outside, a guard's voice tight with adrenaline reporting that a vehicle had attempted to breach the perimeter and had been repelled without casualties on their side. Whoever had been inside the vehicle had retreated the moment resistance became clear, though the message was unmistakable. Victor Hale was testing their defenses, probing for weaknesses, and he was not going to stop. Dmitri returned to Elena's side once the threat passed, finding her sitting upright, pale but alert, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. "You're awake," he said, relief flooding his voice despite the tension still coiled through his body. "What is happening?" Elena asked, her voice hoarse from days of disuse. "Why was there gunfire?" Dmitri hesitated, weighing how much to reveal to a woman who had just spent 3 days fighting for her life. But he had learned enough about her already to know she deserved honesty rather than protection through ignorance. "Someone poisoned me at the club. You saved my life by drinking it instead." That was 3 days ago. Since then, the people responsible have made 2 attempts to finish what they started, once against you directly. Elena absorbed this information slowly, her mind still foggy from days of unconsciousness, though the weight of his words settled heavily despite her exhaustion. "Someone tried to kill me while I was unconscious?" "An intruder reached the medical wing 2 nights ago," Dmitri confirmed grimly. "A nurse stopped him before he reached you. Since then, I have moved you to a secured location and doubled every layer of protection around this estate." Elena's hands trembled slightly as she processed the danger she had unknowingly slept through. Though beneath the fear, something else stirred within her, a fierce determination not to remain a passive victim in whatever conflict had ensnared them both. "Who is responsible?" she asked, her voice steadying with resolve. "A man named Victor Hale," Dmitri answered. "Someone with old grievances against my family. Apparently patient enough to wait years for an opportunity like this." Elena studied him carefully, noting the exhaustion evident beneath his composed exterior, the dark circles beneath his eyes, the tension carved permanently into his shoulders, since the moment she woke. You haven't slept, she observed quietly. Not once, in 3 days. I could not, Dmitri admitted, surprising himself with the honesty of the confession. Not while your life remained uncertain. A silence fell between them. Charged with unspoken meaning, neither was ready to address directly. Finally, Dmitri cleared his throat and straightened, his expression shifting back toward business. There is something you need to understand now that you are awake and stable enough to hear it. Elena nodded, bracing herself for whatever came next. Within the traditions of my family's world, Dmitri explained carefully, an act of sacrifice such as yours creates a binding obligation. I am now bound to serve and protect you, to place your safety above nearly every other consideration, until whatever debt exists between us is considered fulfilled. Elena blinked. Certain exhaustion had confused her understanding of his words. You're saying you owe me some kind of service? Precisely that, Dmitri confirmed. That's absurd, Elena said, though weakness robbed her protest of much force. You're a powerful man. I'm nobody. I don't need a servant. Nonetheless, Dmitri said, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his mouth. It is not simply a matter of choice. Tradition demands this, and I intend to honor it fully. Before Elena could argue further, the door burst open, and Oliver rushed inside, his expression urgent. Sir, we've identified movement near the eastern perimeter again. Different vehicles this time, more coordinated. I believe Hale is preparing a larger assault. Dmitri's expression hardened instantly, the brief warmth of their previous exchange replaced by sharp, focused calculation. How much time do we have? Minutes, perhaps, Oliver said grimly. Maybe less. Get every available guard to the perimeter, Dmitri ordered, and prepare the secondary defense protocol. I will not allow him to breach this property. Oliver nodded and disappeared quickly, and Dmitri turned back to Elena, his expression tight with urgency. You need to move, now. Despite her weakness, Elena forced herself upright, adrenaline surging through her veins as Dmitri helped her from the bed, supporting most of her weight as they moved quickly through the hidden passage behind his study toward an even deeper section of the estate, a reinforced shelter built specifically for moments exactly like this one. Outside, chaos erupted across the property. Gunfire echoed from multiple directions as Hale's forces launched a coordinated assault against the estate's defenses, vehicles ramming through the outer gate, while armed men poured through the resulting breach. Dmitri's guards responded immediately, a well-trained defense force meeting the attack with disciplined precision, though the sheer number of Hale's men suggested this assault had been planned meticulously over the preceding days. Inside the reinforced shelter, Elena gripped Dmitri's arm tightly as the sounds of battle raged somewhere above them, muffled but unmistakable through the thick walls surrounding them. Shouldn't you be out there? She asked, fear evident despite her attempt to remain steady. My men can handle the perimeter, Dmitri said, though the tension in his voice betrayed his own worry. My priority is ensuring you remain safe. A loud crash echoed somewhere close by, followed by shouting voices and the unmistakable sound of a struggle just beyond the shelter's reinforced door. Dmitri pushed Elena behind him instinctively, weapon raised toward the entrance, every muscle coiled with readiness, as footsteps approached rapidly from the corridor outside. The door burst open, and for a heart-stopping moment, Elena believed the worst had happened. But it was Oliver, breathless and bleeding from a shallow cut along his temple, relief evident on his face the instant he saw them both unharmed. We've pushed them back, Oliver reported quickly. Hale's men are retreating. We took 2 prisoners, but Hale himself was not among the attackers. He sent others to do his fighting for him. Dmitri exhaled slowly, tension easing slightly from his shoulders, though his expression remained hard with fury. Casualties? 3 of our men injured, none critically. We were fortunate. Fortunate, Dmitri repeated grimly. Or well prepared. Either way, this cannot continue. Hale grows bolder with every attempt, and eventually his luck or ours will run out. Elena, still gripping the edge of Dimitri's sleeve, spoke quietly but firmly. Then we need to end this before it goes any further. Both men turned to look at her, surprise evident on their faces at the resolve in her voice, despite her obvious exhaustion and lingering weakness. Elena, you've barely survived poisoning, Dimitri said carefully. This is not something you need to involve yourself in. I'm already involved, Elena countered, her eyes steady, despite the fear still lingering beneath her determination. Whoever this man is, he's tried to kill me twice now, simply because I saved your life. I have every right to understand why, and every right to help end this threat. Dimitri studied her for a long moment, recognizing something familiar in her stubborn resolve. A reflection, perhaps, of his own refusal to back down from danger, regardless of personal cost. Very well, he said finally. But you will not act alone, and you will not take unnecessary risks. Agreed? Elena nodded, gratitude and determination mixing within her chest. Over the following days, as the estate's defenses were reinforced further and the wounded guards recovered, Elena's own strength gradually returned as well. She spent hours in Dimitri's study, reviewing whatever information his network had gathered regarding Victor Hale, searching for connections, patterns, weaknesses that might explain the depth of his hatred toward the Volkov family. During one such session, poring over old documents late into the evening, Elena discovered a name that made her blood run cold. Buried within a decade-old business ledger, connected to a shipment dispute between Hale's organization and a smaller independent operator, was the name Daniel Cross. Her brother. Dimitri, she called out, her voice trembling with sudden, overwhelming emotion. You need to see this. He crossed the room quickly, studying the document she held out with shaking hands. His expression shifted from confusion to grave understanding as he read the details carefully. This connects your brother directly to Hale's organization, he said slowly. Years before his death. He worked for Hale, Elena said, horror and clarity mixing painfully within her voice. Not just some smaller organization loosely connected to yours. He worked directly under Victor Hale. Dimitri's expression darkened further as pieces began falling into place, connections forming that suggested this conflict ran far deeper and far older than a simple grudge against his family's recent success. If your brother worked for Hale and died under suspicious circumstances, he said carefully, there may be a connection between his death and whatever grievance Hale now holds against me. Elena's hands trembled as she set the document down, years of unanswered questions about her brother's death suddenly threatening to unravel into something far more complicated and dangerous than she had ever imagined. I need to know what happened to him, she said, her voice steady despite the emotion churning within her. Whatever the truth is, however dangerous, I need to know. Dimitri reached out, taking her trembling hands gently in his own. Then we will find out together, he promised. Whatever this connection reveals, we face it side by side. Outside, beyond the estate's reinforced walls, the sun began setting over a city that remained, for now, unaware of the storm building steadily within its shadows. A storm that had begun with a single poisoned glass and now threatened to consume everyone connected to the deadly secrets buried within Victor Hale's carefully guarded past. The van skidded to a stop outside a small apartment building, and before Elena had even registered the danger, two men in dark clothing were dragging a struggling figure toward its open side door. She recognized him instantly, even from a distance. Marcus, the young guard who had betrayed the estate's location weeks earlier, now paying the price for his forced cooperation with Hale's organization. Stop the car, Elena said sharply, gripping the door handle of the vehicle carrying her and Dimitri through the city. Elena, this is not your fight, Dimitri warned, though he had already signaled his driver to slow down, recognizing the scene unfolding ahead of them. He was threatened into helping them, Elena argued. He doesn't deserve whatever they're planning for him. Dimitri's jaw tightened as he studied the situation quickly, weighing risk against consequence, with the rapid calculation of a man accustomed to split-second decisions. "Oliver, get eyes on this." Quietly. Their vehicle pulled into a nearby alley, and within moments, Oliver and two additional guards moved swiftly through the shadows, intercepting the kidnapping before the van could pull away. What followed was fast and tense, a brief but decisive confrontation that ended with Hale's men fleeing on foot, while Marcus, bruised but alive, was pulled to safety. "They found him hiding," Oliver reported once the immediate danger passed, helping Marcus into their vehicle. Hale wanted him silenced before he could reveal anything further about the organization's inner workings. Marcus, shaking and grateful, looked between Dimitri and Elena with wide, frightened eyes. "I never wanted any of this," he stammered. "Hale has files, ledgers, everything documenting years of operations. If you could get access to them, you would understand exactly what he's hiding." "Where are these files kept?" Dimitri asked immediately, recognizing the potential value of such information. "A secondary property," Marcus explained quickly. "Not his main compound. A warehouse near the docks, disguised as a shipping business. Security is lighter there because most people don't know it exists." Elena and Dimitri exchanged a glance, both recognizing the opportunity this information represented. If Hale's own records connected him directly to Daniel Cross's death years earlier, they would finally have concrete proof, evidence that could expose him completely, rather than relying solely on suspicion and circumstantial connection. That evening, back at the estate, Dimitri gathered his most trusted associates to plan their approach carefully. "We move quietly," he instructed, spreading a map of the docks across his desk. "No confrontation unless absolutely necessary. Our priority is retrieving those records intact." "I want to come," Elena said firmly, standing at the edge of the gathered group. "Absolutely not," Dimitri replied without hesitation. "This is exactly the kind of danger I promised to keep you away from." "This is about my brother," Elena countered, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. "I have earned the right to be there when the truth finally comes to light." Dimitri studied her for a long moment, recognizing the same unbreakable resolve that had first drawn her between him and a poisoned glass. Finally, reluctantly, he nodded. "You stay close to me at all times. No exceptions." 2 nights later, under cover of darkness, their small team approached the warehouse near the docks, moving with careful precision through shadows cast by looming shipping containers. Oliver led the way, disabling a simple alarm system with practiced efficiency, while Dimitri guided Elena carefully through the narrow pathways between towering stacks of cargo. Inside the warehouse, dim emergency lighting cast long shadows across rows of file cabinets and locked storage rooms. Marcus's information proved accurate, guiding them toward a hidden office tucked behind a false wall, exactly where the most sensitive records were reportedly kept. Dimitri worked quickly to bypass the lock, while Elena kept watch nearby, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. Finally, the door swung open, revealing rows of carefully organized files, ledgers documenting years of Hale's operations in meticulous detail. "Find anything related to Daniel Cross," Dimitri instructed quietly, and together they began searching through the extensive records, moving as quickly as possible given the danger of remaining in the compromised location for too long. It was Elena who found it first, a thin folder tucked toward the back of a locked cabinet, her brother's name written clearly across the tab in faded ink. Her hands trembled as she opened it, revealing detailed records of financial transactions, correspondence, and finally, a report documenting the exact circumstances surrounding his death. Her breath caught as she read through the details rapidly. Daniel had discovered evidence that Hale was redirecting organizational funds for personal enrichment, evidence significant enough to threaten Hale's standing within the broader criminal community. Rather than risk exposure, Hale had ordered Daniel's death, disguising the murder as an unrelated territorial conflict to avoid drawing suspicion toward himself. He killed him to protect a secret, Elena whispered, tears blurring her vision as 3 years of unanswered questions finally resolved into painful, undeniable clarity. My brother died because he was honest. Dmitri moved close beside her, gently taking the folder to review the details himself, his expression darkening with each line he read. This is more than enough evidence to expose him completely, he said grimly. Financial fraud, murder, deliberate deception within his own organization. This will destroy whatever remains of his standing. Before they could discuss their next steps further, a sharp alarm suddenly blared through the warehouse, red emergency lights flashing overhead. Someone had discovered their intrusion. We need to move, now, Oliver said urgently, appearing in the doorway with his weapon already drawn. Security detail is converging on this section. Dmitri grabbed the folder securely, tucking it beneath his jacket as he pulled Elena toward the exit, guards moving quickly to cover their retreat. They emerged from the hidden office just as the first of Hale's security team rounded the corner, shouts echoing through the warehouse as their presence was fully discovered. What followed was a tense, fast-moving retreat through the maze of shipping containers, guards on both sides exchanging brief bursts of gunfire while Dmitri shielded Elena with his own body, guiding her swiftly toward their waiting vehicle at the edge of the property. Bullets ricocheted off metal containers around them. The night filled with shouting and chaos as their small team fought their way back toward safety. Almost there, Dmitri said, his voice tight with focused urgency as they sprinted the final stretch toward the vehicle. Oliver and the remaining guards provided cover fire, ensuring their pursuers remained at bay long enough for everyone to reach the car safely. They peeled away from the docks at high speed, tires screeching against pavement as Dmitri finally allowed himself to exhale, checking Elena carefully for any injury despite the frantic escape they had just survived. Are you hurt? He asked urgently. I'm fine, Elena assured him, though her hands still trembled from the adrenaline coursing through her system. We got the proof. That's what matters. Dmitri studied the folder, still clutched securely against his chest, recognizing the significance of what they had risked everything to obtain. This will end him, he said with quiet certainty. Once this evidence becomes known, Hale will lose everything he has spent years building. Back at the estate, safely behind reinforced walls once more, Dmitri called an emergency meeting with several respected leaders from various organizations across the city, presenting the evidence against Hale with methodical precision. The reaction was immediate and severe, disgust and anger rippling through the gathered leaders as the full scope of Hale's betrayal became undeniably clear. Word spread quickly through the underground network that governed the city's criminal factions, and within days, Victor Hale found himself increasingly isolated, former allies distancing themselves rapidly from a man now exposed as both a murderer and a thief within his own organization. Elena, watching these developments unfold from the relative safety of Dmitri's estate, finally allowed herself to feel something resembling closure regarding her brother's death, though grief still lingered heavily within her heart. She stood beside Dmitri one evening in the quiet garden, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold. 3 years, she said softly, and finally, I know the truth. The truth came at great cost, Dmitri said gently, taking her hand in his. But you fought for it every step of the way, Elena. Your brother would be proud of the courage it took to see this through. Elena leaned against him slightly, exhaustion and relief mixing within her chest as she finally allowed herself to release some of the tension she had carried for years. What happens to Hale now? She asked. He is finished within this world, Dmitri confirmed. Stripped of influence, abandoned by allies, exposed completely for the crimes he committed. Though I suspect a man that desperate will not accept his downfall quietly. As if summoned by his words, Oliver appeared suddenly at the edge of the garden, his expression grave. Sir, we've received word. Hale has gone into hiding, but our sources indicate he's planning something significant, something desperate. He knows this is his last chance to reclaim what he's lost. Dimitri's expression hardened instantly, protective instinct sharpening every muscle in his body as he glanced toward Elena, understanding immediately that a desperate, cornered enemy posed perhaps the greatest danger of all. "Then we prepare for whatever comes next," he said firmly. "This ends soon, one way or another." Elena felt a chill settle over her despite the warmth of the evening air, recognizing that their fight, though significantly advanced, remained far from truly finished. Somewhere within the city's shadows, Victor Hale was planning his final, desperate move, and Elena understood with growing certainty that the most dangerous confrontation still lay directly ahead of them. Smoke curled from the shattered window as Elena was wrenched from her bed in the dead of night, a rough hand clamping over her mouth before she could scream. Two men in dark clothing dragged her through the estate's private garden while chaos erupted behind them, an explosion tearing through the Western Guard post as a deliberate distraction, drawing every available defender away from the one place they should have protected most closely. Elena fought desperately, kicking and clawing against her captors, but the men were strong and prepared, forcing her into a waiting vehicle before her muffled cries could reach anyone capable of helping her. The car sped away into the night, leaving the burning estate and its scrambling guards far behind. Dimitri emerged from the chaos of the explosion to find her room empty, the shattered window and overturned furniture telling a story that sent ice-cold terror flooding through his veins for the first time in longer than he could remember. "Elena!" he shouted, though he already understood, with sickening certainty, that shouting would bring no answer. "Sir?" Oliver called urgently, rushing to his side. "We found tire tracks leading toward the Eastern Service Road. This was planned, coordinated with the explosion as a distraction." "Hale!" Dimitri growled, fury and fear tangled together into something dangerous and absolute. "He's taken her." Within minutes, Dimitri had mobilized every resource at his disposal, tracking devices activated, informants contacted, every available guard pulled from perimeter duty to join the search. His hands shook, not from fear for himself, but from a terror more consuming than anything he had experienced watching her fight for her life against the poison weeks earlier. Across the city, Elena was dragged into a dimly lit warehouse, the same location, she realized with dawning horror, where she and Dimitri had stolen the evidence against Hale just days earlier. Victor Hale himself stood waiting, his expression cold and calculating despite the visible strain of a man watching his entire world collapse around him. "You caused this," Hale said, circling her slowly as her captors forced her into a chair, binding her wrists tightly. "A simple hostess who decided to play hero, and now everything I built lies in ruins." "You killed my brother," Elena spat back, refusing to let fear overwhelm her voice, despite the danger surrounding her. "Everything that's happening to you now is because of choices you made." Hale's expression twisted with fury at her defiance. "Your brother was a fool who couldn't keep his mouth shut. And you," he continued, leaning closer, "will be the leverage that ensures Volkov finally pays for destroying what I spent decades building." He pulled out a phone, dialing a number Elena recognized instantly as belonging to Dimitri's private line. When the call connected, Hale's voice carried a calm menace that sent chills through Elena's entire body. "Volkov, I have something precious to you. If you want her returned alive, you will come alone, unarmed, to the docks within the hour." Dimitri's voice, tight with barely controlled fury, responded immediately. "If you harm her, Hale, nothing on this earth will save you from what I do next." "Then don't test me," Hale replied coldly, before ending the call abruptly. Elena watched Hale pace the warehouse floor, his desperation evident in every tense movement, and understood with growing clarity that a man this cornered, this close to losing everything, might not honor any promise of her safe release, regardless of whether Dimitri complied with his demands. Meanwhile, Dimitri raced through the city, ignoring Oliver's urgent warnings about the obvious trap awaiting him. "This is exactly what he wants," Oliver argued from the passenger seat. You walking in unarmed, exactly where he controls every advantage. I don't care, Dmitri said, his voice hard and absolute. I will not risk her life through hesitation. Then let us come with you, Oliver pressed, quietly, from a different direction. You go in as he demands, but we position ourselves nearby, ready to move the moment an opportunity presents itself. Dmitri considered this quickly, recognizing the tactical wisdom despite his desperate urge to charge in directly. Fine, but stay hidden until I signal. I won't risk her life on a rescue that moves too soon. The plan set into motion, Dmitri's vehicle approaching the docks alone, while Oliver and a small team of guards positioned themselves strategically among the shipping containers, weapons ready, waiting for the precise moment to act. Dmitri entered the warehouse exactly as instructed, hands visibly empty, his expression a mask of controlled calm despite the fury and fear churning beneath the surface. You came, Hale said, satisfaction evident in his voice as Dmitri stepped into the dim light. Wise decision. Release her, Dmitri said flatly, his eyes locking immediately onto Elena, relief flooding through him at the sight of her alive, though anger flared at the sight of the ropes binding her wrists. Release her, Hale repeated, a cruel smile spreading across his face. You misunderstand the situation, Volkov. I didn't bring you here to negotiate her release. I brought you here because watching you suffer will bring me far greater satisfaction than any amount of money or influence ever could. He gestured, and two of his men stepped forward, weapons raised toward Dmitri. Elena's heart pounded frantically as she watched the scene unfold, understanding with sudden clarity that Hale never intended to let either of them leave this warehouse alive. You won't get away with this, Elena said desperately, struggling against her restraints. Too many people already know the truth about you. Perhaps, Hale acknowledged coldly, but I intend to at least ensure Volkov pays personally for exposing me, before whatever consequences follow eventually catch up to me as well. As Hale's men closed in around Dmitri, a sudden crash echoed through the warehouse, one of the large side doors bursting open as Oliver and his team surged inside, weapons drawn, catching Hale's remaining guards completely off guard. Chaos erupted instantly, gunfire and shouting filling the space as Dmitri used the momentary distraction to lunge toward the nearest guard, disarming him with practiced, brutal efficiency. Elena twisted desperately against her restraints as the confrontation raged around her, watching in terror as Dmitri fought his way through Hale's remaining men, moving with a speed and precision that spoke to years of training beneath his usually composed exterior. Hale, seeing his plan collapsing rapidly, grabbed a fallen weapon and turned it directly toward Elena. If I go down, he snarled, she goes down with me. Time seemed to slow as Dmitri spun toward the sound of Hale's voice, recognizing the danger, a fraction of a second too late to intervene directly. But Oliver, positioned perfectly from his earlier approach, fired first, striking the weapon from Hale's hand before he could pull the trigger, the bullet ricocheting harmlessly off the warehouse's metal flooring. Hale stumbled backward, clutching his injured hand, his expression twisting from fury into sudden, desperate fear as he realized his final gamble had failed completely. Dmitri closed the distance between them in seconds, pinning Hale firmly against the nearest wall. It's over, Dmitri said, his voice low and absolute. You've lost everything, Hale. Your influence, your allies, and now your freedom. Guards moved quickly to secure Hale as the remaining fight drained from his resistance, the desperate man finally understanding that every avenue of escape had closed completely around him. Dmitri turned immediately toward Elena, rushing to her side to untie the ropes binding her wrists, his hands gentle despite the adrenaline still coursing powerfully through his body. Are you hurt? He asked urgently, checking her carefully for any injury. I'm okay, Elena assured him, though her voice trembled with the aftermath of everything she had just endured. You came for me. I would always come for you, Dmitri said softly, pulling her into a careful, protective embrace. Nothing could have kept me away. As authorities aligned with the various criminal factions across the city arrived to take custody of Hale and process the scene, Elena finally allowed herself to relax against Dimitri's chest, exhaustion and relief overwhelming her after the terror of the past several hours. The danger that had shadowed them both since that first poisoned glass had finally, completely, come to an end. In the weeks that followed, life within the estate gradually settled into a calmer, steadier rhythm. Hale's organization dissolved entirely under the weight of the evidence against him, his remaining associates scattering or seeking amnesty from rival factions, eager to absorb whatever resources remained. Elena's name and the sacrifice that had started this entire chain of events became something of a quiet legend within the careful, secretive world Dimitri inhabited. One evening, as the last golden light of sunset spilled across the estate's gardens, Dimitri found Elena standing quietly near the fountain, her expression peaceful for the first time since they had met. He approached slowly, studying her carefully before speaking. "The debt between us," he said softly, "according to every tradition I was raised to honor, has been more than fulfilled. I have protected you, uncovered the truth about your brother, and ensured the man responsible faced justice." Elena turned to face him, her heart quickening slightly at the seriousness in his tone. "So this is where it ends?" "No," Dimitri said, stepping closer, taking her hands gently in his own. "This is where something new begins, if you'll allow it. Not obligation, not tradition, but a choice, freely made, to remain beside you because I want to, not because duty demands it." Elena felt tears gathering in her eyes, though this time they carried nothing but happiness and relief. "I want that too," she whispered, "more than I ever expected to want anything." As the sun finally disappeared beyond the horizon, painting the sky in soft shades of purple and gold, Dimitri leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss against her forehead, sealing a promise built not on debt or tradition, but on genuine devotion forged through danger, sacrifice, and the unbreakable bond that had formed between two people who had, against every impossible odd, found something precious within a world defined by violence and fear. Their story, born from a single act of selfless courage beside a poisoned glass, had transformed completely into something neither had anticipated when their paths first collided that fateful night. Elena Cross, once a stranger risking everything for a man she barely knew, now stood beside him not as his servant, but as his equal, his partner, and the woman who had taught one of the city's most feared men that true strength lay not in power or fear, but in the quiet, unwavering courage to protect what truly mattered most.